When it comes to fashion icons who don't just wear clothes but speak through them, Solange Knowles stands in a league of her own. Over the years, we've watched her evolve from the bright-eyed younger sister of global superstar into an avant-garde artist, a fashion visionary, and a minimalist muse. But her journey wasn't instant. It was layered, deeply personal, and often reflective of her own transformation as a Black woman navigating music, motherhood, and the art world. Today we're unpacking the full evolution of Solange's style, how it's shifted through the years, how it's mirrored her emotional and creative phases, and why her fashion legacy deserves a deep dive of its own. Now, let's start at the beginning. Teen years, Destiny's Child era. Solange was just a teen when we were first introduced to her, and back then, let's be honest, her style was very much in tune with the early 2000s pop culture, Y2K realness, bold color blocking, shiny fabrics, flared jeans, and those iconic coordinated sets that defined the era. At this point, she was mostly known as Beyoncé's little sister, and with Destiny's Child at their peak, the public eye was already on her before she'd even had a chance to carve her own lane. There was definitely pressure to fit the mold, both as Knowles and as young women in the spotlight. The early 2000s were a time of hyper-feminine pop girl aesthetic, and Solange's wardrobe reflected that. Pink velour, tracksuits, chunky belts, low-rise jeans, bedazzled everything. She was young, still experimenting, and understandably trying to find where she belonged stylistically and personally. But even then, there were little flashes of individuality, a quirky print here, a bold accessory there. It wasn't fully formed yet, but it was simmering beneath the surface, that distinctive Solange essence. And while some dismissed her as simply riding the coattails of Knowles' name, those who were paying attention could already see it. She wasn't just Beyoncé's sister, she was her own artist in the making. Motherhood and transitional years. After her bright Y2K teen years, Solange entered a quieter, more transitional chapter, one that often gets overlooked, but was absolutely foundational to her evolution. It wasn't just her personal life that shifted. Her public image softened, matured, and grew more grounded. You could see that in how she dressed, still playful, but with a new sense of intention. The loud prints and ultra-trendy looks gave way to more refined silhouettes, casual chic ensembles, and pieces that reflected both comfort and style. Think wrap dresses, big hoops, soft curls, and vintage-inspired looks. There was a quite cool forming, a kind of elegance that didn't need scream to be noticed. This era was also when Solange began to experiment creatively, outside of just music. She started dabbling into acting, appearing in films like Johnson's Family Vacation, and even took a stab at voice acting. She was also working as a DJ on the side, showing her deep love for music and creation long before she became the alt R&B darling that we know now. During this time, her style felt like it was in between worlds, still accessible, still influenced by the mainstream, but slowly leaning into something more eclectic, more artsy, more her. And let's not forget, this was still the mid-2000s, while many pop stars were leaning into all-over-the-top red carpet glam. Solange was increasingly turning towards vintage stores, Afro bohemian influence, and mixing high fashion with thrift finds. She wasn't just following trends, she was quietly developing a language of her own. Looking back, this era marks a crucial turning point. She wasn't fully in the spotlight yet, But she was doing the inner work, raising her son, exploring different parts of herself, testing out new creative lanes. And you can see it in her fashion, a bit more restrained, still evolving, but undeniably shifting towards the Solange we'd come to know today. This was just the beginning of her becoming. Solo career, rebirth. If her transitional years were about experimenting and quietly building her identity, 2008 was when Solange fully stepped into her own world, and she brought a whole new vibe with her. This was the beginning of Solange stepping fully into her own lane, musically and visually. During this time, she embraced vintage fashion, retro silhouettes, and Afrofuturistic influences. One of the most striking moments from this era was the Losing You video, released in 2012, a vibrant, fashion-forward tribute to the South African swanka culture. It was playful, global, and unmistakably her, blending cultural reverence with fashion storytelling in a way that felt fresh and deeply intentional. I actually touched on this in my recent deep dive into swanka subculture and Africa's influence on superfine tailoring, so if you haven't seen that one yet, I definitely highly recommend for you to check it out after this one. This was the Soul Angel and the Hadley Sang Dreams era. Her second studio album was a love letter to retro soul and Motown, fused with quirky production and spacey synths. But beyond the music, it was a statement, a declaration that she was carving her own lane. Her style during this era, completely transformative, gone where the safe mid-2000s fits in their place, big Diana Ross hair, vintage Yves Saint Laurent inspired tailoring, bold colors, geometric prints, and 60s mod influences. She embraced loud, unapologetic patterns, polka dots, florals, checkerboards, often paired with statement accessories and sky-high heels. But it wasn't costumey, it felt personal, it felt intentional. Solange was clearly saying, I'm not trying to be anyone else's little sister anymore. This era also marked her first big leap into the fashion conversation. She wasn't just showing up to events, she was standing out. Editors, stylists, and fashion insiders began taking notice. She became a darling of the indie black cool scene, someone who effortlessly fused fashion, music, and cultural aesthetics in a way that was completely ahead of its time. Her love for vintage fashion really took center stage here. Solange became known for digging through thrift stores, finding one-of-one pieces, and mixing eras unexpected ways. She brought a sense of archival awareness to black style, making references to Nina Simone, to Harlem's 60s jazz scene, to black women of the past who embodied both elegance and rebellion. And then there was the Afrofuturism. You could see it in not just in her music videos, but in her styling, metallics, sculptural silhouettes, futuristic eyewear. This was a black woman imagining herself beyond limitation, beyond genre, beyond trends, beyond binaries. Through her style, she was painting a portrait of a multidimensional black woman, artsy, intellectual, playful, powerful. Looking back, this wasn't just a rebrand, it was a rebirth. Solange was no longer in anyone's shadow, she was becoming the moment. And the world was finally starting to catch on. The big chop, Afrocentric, Reclamation era. Solange's big chop wasn't just a hair decision, it was a full-on set receipt. In 2009, she shaved off her hair, and the internet, especially the mainstream media, didn't know how to respond. But for many black women, especially those navigating beauty politics, it was clear this was a deeply personal, deeply political move. The big chop marked a turning point, not just in how Solange was perceived, but in how she presented herself to the world. Gone were the long weaves and industry-polished glam. In there, place, her natural texture, her raw beauty, her authentic self. She instantly became a natural hair icon, and this wasn't just about the aesthetics, it was about the autonomy. She once tweeted that she cut off her hair because she wanted to feel liberated, not to make a statement. But in a world where women's hair is always politicized, the personal is the political. This shift in her hair also mirrored a shift in her fashion. Her style became more architectural, sculptural, even poetic. You started to see her in garments that embraced Afrocentric silhouettes and rich textures, linen, silk, raw cotton. There was a quiet drama to her outfits. Flowing kaftans, wide-leg trousers, boxy tailoring, and bold monochrome that felt like wearable art. She began leaning into African spiritual and cultural symbolism in a way that felt rooted, not performative. You could see influence of Yoruba fashion in her head wraps, gold jewelry, and layered fabrics. There were also nods to Art Deco and mid-century modernism, sharp lines, geometric forms, and intentional asymmetry. The colors shifted too. Earth tones, sun-faded reds, ochres, indigos. The palette wasn't loud, but it spoke volumes. It was ancestral. It was diasporic. It was personal. In this era, Solange became a visual storyteller. Her outfits weren't just about what was trending. They were about telling stories of blackness that transcended time, geography, and expectation. And she started curating her entire life like this. Her Instagram feed became a canvas. Her public appearance felt like performance art. Even her silence, her stillness carried a meaning. The big chop wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of Solange as a living, breathing art installation, blending music, Black identity, minimalism, and high concept fashion into a world of her own making. She wasn't just expressing herself, she was reclaiming herself. A seat at the table era. If Solange's big chop was the reseat, then a seat at the table was the arrival. Released in 2016, this wasn't just an album, it was a fully realized aesthetic universe, a meditation on Black womanhood, rage, healing, identity, and visually, it was flawless. Released in 2016, this wasn't just an album, it was a fully realized aesthetic universe, a meditation on Black womanhood, rage, healing, identity, and visually, it was flawless. This era defined Solange's style for many people. It was the moment when her artistry, fashion, and activism came together in a perfect harmony. The looks, intentional, every outfit during this time felt like a sculpture, like a whispered protest. Think muted palettes, warm rusts, creams, deep olives. The styling leaned soft but strong, soft power, as Solange embodied it. Her fashion choices felt symbolic. They weren't just beautiful, they told stories. Clothes became armor, celebration, resistance. Let's talk about cranes in the sky. Video for a second. Floating isolated landscapes, Solange in striking minimalist silhouettes, standing still against vast skies, concrete walls, sand, water. Her body became a momentum. Her garments moved like breath. The clothing here emphasized solitude, reflection, weightlessness, mirroring the emotional tone of the song. Then came Don't Touch My Hair, a bold declaration of bodily autonomy and cultural pride. The visuals were rich with meaning. Solange in a circle of Black men in white turtlenecks, Solange with a crystal Afro crown, Solange in structured metallic garments that felt like futuristic armor in the diaspora. The hairstyles weren't just decoration, They were a central character in that story. This era showcased Solange as a master of narrative fashion. She wasn't just dressing to impress, she was dressing to express. Her performance looks during this time continued this ethos: monochromatic stages, uniform dancers, architectural garments. She created worlds where blackness could breathe, float, grieve, and dance. And here's the thing. None of it felt performative. It was deeply felt. You could tell this wasn't trend chasing. This was soul work. Solange was channeling something bigger than fashion. She was wearing liberation. With a seat at the table, Solange didn't just become a style icon. She became a cultural force, redefining what it means to be both artist and canvas. Divorce and rebirth. In 2019, Solange quietly announced that she and her husband of 5 years, Alan Ferguson, had separated. There was no tailored frenzy, no dramatic headlines, just a soft, intentional letting go. But if you paid attention to her work, to her visuals, to her style, you could feel the shift. This was a rebirth, but not the loud, triumphant kind. It was subtle, quiet, deeply internal. Her fashion followed suit. She moved even further away from the conventional ideas of celebrity style and into something that felt more conceptual, introspective, and almost sacred. Gone were the matching sister looks, the viral fashion moments. What replaced them was a kind of avant-garde softness, fashion that blurred the lines between garment and gesture, outfit and offering. During this time, her clothes became more sculptural, more abstract, less about beauty and more about energy. Her public appearance started to feel like a performance art. Think bare feet, loose silhouette, rich texture, and garments that looked like they were in conversation with architecture and landscape. It was as if she was using her body as a vessel for something bigger, channeling rather than wearing. It wasn't flashy, it was ritualistic. You could feel the healing. You could see the detachment from mainstream validation. This wasn't divorce glam. This was liberation couture, a rejection of perfection, a return to essence. She leaned into experimental black womanhood, a space rarely explored in the public eye, the kind that's raw, fluid, non-linear. She wasn't trying to sell a story, she was living one. Her social media presence became more abstract too, less selfies, more still life, more light, more breath. Her style was communicating a woman who was no longer performing for anyone, not even for us. And that's what made it powerful. When I Get Home era. After the quiet transformation that followed her divorce, Solange returned with something that felt less like an album and more like a portal. When I Get Home wasn't just music, it was architecture, memory, sound healing, and ancestral veneration. And her style during this era mirrored that exact energy: surreal, sacred, southern, and sublime. You could tell immediately Solange was no longer interested in simply being fashionable. She was creating entire visual landscape, becoming the centerpiece of her own mythology. In this era, her fashion leaned deep into Afro-Surrealism and Southern Black abstraction. She wore garments that looked like sculptures, layered, sculpted, and spatial. Her body became an art form. You'd see her in glossy black leather bodysuits with cowboy hats, blending Houston roots with high art. One moment she'd be riding a horse through the desert in chrome. The next she'd be seated in an all-white room dressed like a futuristic priestess. There was a cosmic fluidity in her visuals. Time collapsed, space expanded. The styling in this era had echoes of Sun Ra, Janelle Monáe's early Afrofuturism, and Yoruba ceremonial aesthetics, but made woolly her own. There was also a notable shift in how she used fashion. It became less about self-expression and more about place and presence. Her visuals were filmed at iconic Houston landmarks, Black-owned horse ranches, Rothko Chapel, and Afro-diasporic spaces in Texas. Her looks blended into these environments, not as decoration, but as a kind of communion. She wasn't just dressing up for the camera, she was channeling the spirit of the South, of Black womanhood, of the cosmic ancestors who lived in sound, in movement, in land. And all of this reflected her continued growth as a multidisciplinary artist. She was creating performances at the Getty, choreographing gallery spaces, directing films, and composing minimalist jazz-inspired composition. Fashion was no longer separated. It was embedded in her art practice. This era solidified Solange as not just a style icon, but a cultural architect. She wasn't dressing for applause, she was dressing for alignment. Saint Heron and Minimalist High Art. After When I Get Home, Solange's evolution took another turn, this time into something even more quieter, but not less radical. She became less visible in the celebrity space, but more present in the art world. Through her creativity agency and cultural platform, Saint Heron, she's been curating a space for Black futurism, archival preservation, and experimental design, and her personal style followed suit. This era isn't about spectacle, it's about intention, restraint, and grace. You'll notice Solange now often appears in minimalist silhouettes, neutral tones, and pieces that feel more like second skin than fashion statements. Yet even simplicity, there's always depth, sculptural cuts, textured fabrics, and unexpected asymmetry. She's moved into the realm of quiet luxury, but not in the capitalist logo-driven sense. Think more like ancestral elegance meets gallery space serenity. Solange isn't trying to keep up with the trends or visibility. She's building legacy. She's designing for museums, performing in ballets, composing for orchestras, and still centering Black interiority at every turn. Her minimalist style now feels like a soft rebellion, a refusal to be consumed, labeled, or explained. It's the fashion of someone who has nothing to prove and everything to protect. And that's what makes her style so influential. She's never followed the rules. She's redefined what a fashion icon can be. Not just someone who wears clothes well, but someone who uses fashion to tell a spiritual, political, and deeply personal story. And that's the evolution of Solange Knowles, an artist who doesn't just wear clothes, but tells stories through style, from Y2K teen looks to her architectural minimalism today. Every era has been intentional, layered, and deeply personal. Her fashion journey isn't just about trends, it's about transformation, healing, and Black creativity freedom. And if you reached this far, thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, I'd love it if you gave this video a thumbs up, dropped a comment, even just a black heart, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next fashion deep dive. And if this resonated with you, you'll probably enjoy my video on Zoe Kravitz's style evolution and my recent essay on African fashion influence on superfine tailoring, where I actually mentioned Solange Losing You video and its nod to Swenkas. Thank you so much for spending time with me, and I'll see you on my next video. Bye!